Our next speaker is Jim Simpson. He has a slideshow. Jim is an investigative journalist, businessman, and former economist. He was a budget examiner for the White House Office of Management and Budget. He's an expert on immigration and refugee resettlement, picking up on the themes of Elizabeth Wolfe and the refugee issue. Jim is the author of the recent book, The Red-Green Axis, Refugees, Immigration, and the Agenda to Erase America. Jim Simpson.
I'm ready. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. I feel very fortunate and grateful to be here to be able to talk in front of you today. My book is called The Red-Green Axis, Refugees, Immigration, and the Agenda to Erase America. And you've heard our prior speakers talk about how the left and the Islamists work together to suppress free speech. This is not an accident. This is an agenda. It is an agenda for power and control. And in fact, the entire multicultural agenda is not an innocent agenda. The goal is to erase Western culture. The goal is to bring in so many different diverse cultures and peoples and backgrounds that our unique culture that has given us unprecedented prosperity and peace will just vanish. It will disappear and we will become just other citizens. In fact, we are what they call old Americans. The refugees and immigrants coming into the United States are called new Americans. So, that's the title of my book. Sorry. You know, they say that if we don't do something, ISIS will come into the United States. Well, I got news for you folks. ISIS is already here. We have already had 87 arrests and 28 convictions throughout the United States. The FBI is conducting about 1,000 investigations as we speak in 50 different states. Next. We have had 580 terrorism convictions since 9/11. 40 of those have been among refugees. Don't let anybody tell you refugees don't engage in terrorism. And we talk about terrorism. It's not Mennonite terrorism. It is not Methodist VPIEDs. It is Islamic terrorism. The refugee resettlement agenda was actually set in 1976 at the Conference of Human Settlements, and it was reiterated this year with Agenda 2030, where the UN General Secretary said his goal for refugee resettlement was to resettle 2 million people a year. The newly appointed UN High Commissioner for Refugees has said he wants to resettle 480,000 Syrians. And the UN is the largest, did I move that or did you? Stop it, put it back. The UN High Commissioner for Refugees is the State Department's largest multilateral, largest multilateral partner, and we are its greatest donor. We resettle more refugees than all the other resettlement countries in the world combined. And you know, when the UN General Secretary talked about resettlement, and when the UN talks about resettlement, they talk about it as an agenda to redistribute populations. It's not about saving refugees, it's about redistributing populations throughout the world, which goes back to what I said before, that this is an agenda, because the only people in the world who take these refugees, or the only governments, are among the West. You don't see them going to China, you don't see them going to Russia, you definitely don't see them going anywhere in the Middle East. even though they're much better positioned to take care of them. It's all targeted towards the West. So the goal is to redistribute millions of people to the West to make our culture disappear. That's the agenda. Okay, so Syrian issue. To this point, we have resettled over 8,000 Syrian refugees just this year alone. Almost all of them are Muslims. We've resettled, 36 Christians, 0.4%. Who are the ones who are being persecuted in the Middle East? In fact, when we finally just convinced them to classify what's going on with Christians in Syria and Iraq as a genocide. They finally did that. But what most people know is there are a myriad other programs like temporary protected status, humanitarian parole, asylum, where to date we have already taken in 100,000 Syrians. Now, most of those people are not here under, they're in non-immigrant visas, like, for example, student visas, but I would like to see hands of how many people think any of those people are going back to Syria. They have just circumvented the immigration process entirely. We have already gone way ahead of any goals set by any public figure to resettle Syrians, but we're still going to be resettling more if they have their way. The visa waiver program, there are so many, all of those other programs have, there's virtually no way to vet Syrians, but those other programs don't even bother. The visa waiver program, which is an agreement we have with 38 states, mostly in Western Europe, allows people with a passport from, say, Germany or Britain or France, come into the United States without a visa and stay for a specified amount of period. Well, ISIS has a passport manufacturing facility, and we've already caught ISIS members with those. Some of the ones that attacked in France had them. We are tracking, as we speak, people coming into this country, terrorists coming into this country, through the visa waiver program. There were 153,000 overstays last year. Where do those people go? Who are they? What are they doing? We really don't know. 20 million people a year come in through that program. Virtually out of control. Next. So, and it's starting to cost us big bucks. The resettlement program now costs about $3 billion a year. Next. And it is administered by 9 private, tax-exempt organizations that resettle refugees throughout the country. They make millions of dollars a year, about $5,000 a head, resettling refugees. And there's 350 subcontractors who actually do the work, and there's a whole bunch more who resettle unaccompanied alien minors. Next. We give refugees all kinds of benefits, far in excess of what Americans get, and they get the front of the line for housing, furniture, cash, food, all kinds of welfare benefits, drives to work, drives to job interviews, help with filling out forms for job interviews, all of this ahead of veterans, again, ahead of disabled Americans, and ahead of Americans generally. They get that. It's a requirement for these voluntary agencies, the resettlement contractors, to engage in that, to help out refugees at our expense. It's outrageous. But in spite of that, go back to that for a second. In spite of that, refugees use welfare at rates vastly in excess of American citizens. And it takes about 20 years before they finally come down to where they're using welfare at rates roughly comparable to those of the United States. Next. There are innumerable refugee problems. The cost to school districts is incomprehensible. In Lewiston, Maine, the cost for English as a second language has gone from about $100,000 a year to $3 million a year in the last 15 years. I was told a story recently about a elementary school in Michigan 100 students in one semester, they got 200 more. And they were told to deal with it with a school budget designed for 100 students. How do you deal with those kinds of things? How do you deal with them? In Manchester, New Hampshire, there are 82 different languages spoken in public school. The diseases, tuberculosis, the rate of latent TB is off the charts. Between 20 and 49% of all refugees coming in the United States test positive for latent TB. And active TB cases, 66% are non-citizens. 66% of those are non-citizens. 6,335 cases in 2015. Your child's going to school with those kids. Think about that. And the refugees that come here and are diagnosed as having latent TB are given a round of antibiotics to get rid of it. But a lot of times they don't complete the medications, so they get multi-drug resistant latent TB, which becomes active. And 88% of the cases of active multi-drug resistant TB are among the foreign-born today. It's huge. And then we've already heard about the Muslim rape culture. I don't think I need, or we don't really have time to go into all the aspects of that. It'd take forever. Next. And the voluntary agencies blithely, arrogantly ignore the law. They're supposed to consult with communities prior to resettlement. They don't do that unless the community is all for it. If so, then it's all good. But if we are a community that says we don't really want all these problems, then they just go around our back. It's a perfect example in Rutland, Vermont, where the mayor there got offered a very nice, cushy job with the state. He's a Republican, offered this by a Democratic governor, to initiate a refugee program in Rutland, which doesn't have one. And he was going to start it with 100 Syrians, starting October 1st. And he contacted the head of the refugee resettlement program in Virginia, this woman named Amila Mirdzanovic, herself a former refugee, as many of the people in that industry are. And she said, keep quiet. I can't emphasize enough how you have to keep this thing secret and expand slowly until you get supporters, and then bring it out to the public. Once it's a fait accompli, then you can tell the public, well, he did that, but he did it a little early, so now the whole place is in an uproar. Hopefully we'll be able to stop that. Next. Yeah. We hear about how everyone who opposes the refugee agenda, who opposes Islamic terrorism, even those who speak up when there is an Islamist attack, are labeled racists, you know, xenophobes, Islamophobes, et cetera, name your phobe. And, well, Obama has created an organization specifically to go after Americans for that purpose. It's called Welcoming America. How do you like that for newspeak? Welcoming America. The idea is to ram the idea of accepting unlimited immigration down our throats. And they even have brochures to tell how to attack people like me who talk about this program honestly. And it's supported by a network of huge foundations, next please, which you are familiar with some of them, but there are many, many more. Thank you very much. Go to the next slide. Mark, you still have it up? Go to the next slide. Here are a few resources for you. Center for Security Policy, counterjihad.com, and the Refugee Resettlement Watch blog. Thank you very much.